Hey, how's it going? My name is DarkScheme, and today I'll be nitpicking Modern Warfare. So talking points we'll be looking at are the maps, netcode in the game, as well as some gameplay mechanics and equipment, and talking a little bit about the gameplay loop that I kind of have an issue with. So starting off with maps, I think that's a big point of contention for a lot of people. The biggest thing that I see with these maps, because they are dynamic maps compared to the traditional quote-unquote 3-lane Call of Duty maps that we're used to, the spawns are not working perfectly on a lot of these. And I see that a lot more on specific game modes. I think the biggest issue that I see, or the biggest game mode, is domination on Piccadilly. That one suffers from the spawn just not pushing the team that's getting dominated out of a certain side of the map. Every once in a while you get that one player who spawns out, but more often than not it's actually hard to spawn your entire team out from the C flag. So like I said, it's kind of just one of those, they need to look at the spawns a little bit more on certain game modes, on certain maps, in order to get those fixed. But it does suffer from game modes not working on specific maps, even past the spawns. And that's kind of the next point for maps, is that certain game modes just don't play very well on specific maps. A lot of the times when you're starting off the match, you know, the countdown's counting down and both sides are on either side of the map, and more often than not, at least one team is going to get a little bit more of an advantageous spot. The biggest issue that I see is the headquarters game mode on the, I believe it's Pavlov Peaks. I think that's the one game mode where it's a 10v10 sized map, but for whatever reason headquarters is just a big issue on this one. Reason being is the headquarters spawns in the middle of the map, and more often than not the person or the team who captures that first headquarters in the middle of the map is going to have an advantage. Reason being is, what I end up seeing is, the team caps a headquarters, they get completely wiped by the other team, the team disables it, and the team who just got wiped out of that headquarters is going to spawn out and on the next headquarters. And more often than not, this is a big issue for the players who are attacking or disabling the headquarters, because let's say you capture a flag on one end of the map, let's say on, you know, the rightmost side. If you cap it, the strategy for the most part is for the team to get completely wiped out and have your headquarters disabled in order for you to spawn on the next headquarters. Because guess what's going to happen? The team that's disabling the headquarters is going to have to run from that headquarters to the other side of the map for the next headquarters. And besides wasting their time running to your side of the map, they're also having to break your defense on the headquarters as well. So like I said, there are definitely some things that they need to look into for certain maps and game modes, and kind of provide a fix. Another big thing that I see is that a lot of these maps and game modes, for whatever reason, just really don't work for the 10v10 modes. I feel like some maps still feel way too big for what it is, and once again, you know, I hate to do the whole Battlefield versus Call of Duty comparison, but Battlefield had this issue and they fixed it pretty quickly. They had the big maps, you know, they would do 64 versus 64 players, and when it came down to playing 24 players versus 24 players, what they ended up doing is just shrinking down the map and creating boundaries in which the player was only able to play on certain parts of the map. And I think that would be probably the biggest fix for certain maps to make them more 6v6 friendly, 10v10 friendly. And the next point I want to talk about is the netcode. The netcode in this game is definitely not perfect. It's actually far from it. There are definitely some very smart implementations for fixing or smoothing out the netcode in this game by Infinity Ward, but it still suffers from latency issues that I see on my end, and from what I've seen compared from past Call of Duty netcode, it is definitely far from the best. Like I said, Infinity Ward did a good job with this game, with the netcode and the fixes that they have for it, but from what they put out an informational video of the netcode and kind of explaining it and how they fix their netcode on their end. The issue that I have with this is that they're fixing issues that has never really been an issue in past Call of Duties, but for whatever reason, maybe it's the new engine that they're working with, but for the most part I see that they're really fixing issues that the developers they run into compared to what the player runs into. I think both parties run into different issues, and like I said, I appreciate the fixes that they put for netcode. Anything to smooth out the gameplay is you know, absolutely appreciated, but they definitely need to look a little bit more in the perspective of the player and what they run into. And that being said, because of latency issues, you run into things where you die around the corner, or you shoot this guy with 3 shots and then you watch the kill cam and only 1 of your shots came out. So once again, latency issues is definitely a big point of contention here. And moving on to the mechanics and equipment, you know, the big thing for a lot of people here is that this game is completely slowed down compared to other titles. But I feel like it's being slowed down even more so because of artificial items in the game. So right off the top, the movement speed in the beta was pretty slow. The game now live is actually even slower. And that can be one of 2 things. It can either be a change in the field of view that changes how fast you see the speed in the game or how you perceive the speed in the game, or it can actually be that they actually slowed the movement speed in the game down. Now, I'm going to go with they actually moved or decreased the movement speed in the game because of dead silence. And for those who don't know, on top of dead silence giving you silent footsteps, it also does increase your movement speed. So with that coming into the formula for the game, I have a feeling that they had to slow the gameplay down in order for dead silence to not be more powerful than it already is. And as I'm recording this, I do believe that they put in a fix for dead silence and where your footsteps are even quieter now, so it's even stronger than before. And like I said, I can see the logic behind them changing the movement speed, but you know, once you start slowing down the gameplay and you have other, like I said, artificial items or equipment, mechanics slowing down the game even further, you start running into issues. Another big key that slows down gameplay are claymore usage. More often than not, when you run into a claymore, you're probably going to die. And if you have EOD on, even if you run past that claymore and live, when that claymore pops off, the person who set that claymore is probably going to be nearby and they heard that explosion and you're probably going to die anyways. Once again, it slows the game even down because you're pushing the same spot, trying to get that quote-unquote camper out of his room, and you run into, you know, the player trying to make some sort of knowledge or looking to run past the claymore or try and make some sort of play around this camper, but it does slow the game down a ton. You know, something that I would like to be implemented in order to make claymores a little less powerful would be something like add a delayed explosion to the claymores, or have the ability to somehow run past them, or something along the lines of just have them be less powerful. I think for a lot of people, they're either big fans of claymores or not big fans, depending on if you use them or not. And past that, you know, the extreme is to completely take claymores out of the game, but I doubt they will actually do that. I think I see a lot of argument that because this game is as realistic as possible and claymores are used in real life, that these are going to stay in the game, and they are absolutely not going to get removed. And next is, you know, tying kind of maps and what I've already talked about, but because the maps are dynamically designed, a lot of people's lack of knowledge, because the game has only been out for 4 or 5 days, also naturally slows the game down even further. You want to learn the map, you want to learn all the spots, you move up the map slowly because you don't want to die, and then guess what, you actually die and you learn the new spot, and then you run around that same spot, and now you know that that spot is where a lot of people are going to be sitting. But once again, this game feels like it promotes less movement and more kind of just sitting in one spot, you know, aiming down the sides. On top of that, one of the game modes that I have an issue with is TDM. Team Deathmatch in this game mode actually makes the game, I'd say, even slower. With no objective or real reason to push certain sides of the map, the game slowed completely down on certain maps. You're pretty much looking at people who are running into a building, looking out a window, looking out a second window, maybe running downstairs and looking through the door, and that's kind of their gameplay loop. They go downstairs, look at the door, look at the back door, go back upstairs, look at the window, or you'll get the person who straight up just sits at the window. Again, naturally, the game is meant to be slowed down for a more tactically versed gameplay, but what we get with all these artificial items slowing down the game even further is a bogged down version of what this game should be. A lot of the actions per match are completely slowed down compared to past Call of Duty games. And the last point I do want to talk about is the gameplay loops. More often than not, I'm finding myself playing this game a lot less for movement and a lot more for finding spots where I can look across the map just to see people crossing from, you know, A flag to B flag. And while that is good knowledge, I feel like it does slow down the game where you're looking for opponents and every, 1 or 2 minutes you find a kill and then you kind of move on. Whereas in past Call of Duties, you would run around the map and so would everybody else. Of course, the run and gun style is still there, but you need a little bit more map knowledge, and a lot of people are throwing out the word to, you just need to adapt to this game. But the reason that I have an issue with this is that people's methods of adapting to this game is to not move around, and I can see why they don't. It feels like this game actually punishes you or prevents you from moving around the map more often than not. Any type of movement, even just walking around a corner, shouldering a corner when you're peeking around a corner just to get some information or see if anybody's there. More often than not, that person who's in the corner, because they're not moving around, they're not making any noise, and they're going to hear you, and if they have headphones on, they're absolutely going to find exactly and pinpoint where you are. So to me, this game is very punishing for players who work around a map by moving, by running past a certain spot, and a lot of the times, most people, if they're smart, they're not going to be running through the middle of the map, but maybe you're running around a corner because you want to jump around the corner because there's somebody there, but you jump around the corner and there's a claymore. There's not much you could do even if you have EOD popped. So like I said, these are my personal critiques on the game. Hopefully these didn't sound too negative. I think a lot of people see the critiques or any type of criticism towards the game as negative, and realistically I think for a lot of people, and I'd say more closer to 100% than I think a lot of people would assume, a lot of people want this game to succeed, including myself, and in order for that game to succeed, we need to see if we can fix certain things or make the developers aware that this is happening on certain maps, that there's definitely some things that they need to fix or look at, and in order to make that happen, there needs a discussion to start formulating. I think that for the most part, if you see somebody criticizing the game, as long as they're not too emotional about it or using extreme words, most often they're going to be looking to make this game even better or looking to make the game play a little bit smoother. I think right now from what people have is the gameplay loop. And when I say gameplay loop, it's those moments of fun where you find a target, you find your second target, you're really weak and you get a third target, moments where you're capping the flag and you cap the B flag and you die right after, but it was for the win. Those kinds of gameplay loops don't happen as often as I would like them to. The game is slowed down so much that, like I said, promoting any type of movement in the game feels like a punishment. It feels like you're having to go through this tedious task of running to the middle of the map to cap a certain point, and nobody else is, because nobody wants to die, and everybody's just posted up on a certain part of the map, taking a different angle. But like I said, those are my thoughts and feelings on the game, my personal opinion. And let me know if there are certain points that you agree with, certain points that hit home, or maybe, a lot of these points don't really annoy you, you don't really find them to be a big deal. That's definitely some feedback that I would like to hear. I know that there's a discussion and a kind of a discussion going on within the community as well, but I think it's a good discussion to have in order for the developers to see what the community likes, what the community doesn't like, what the community is arguing / discussing, in order for them to see if they can find a fix or maybe even a middle ground to make both parties happy. But that is pretty much it for me today. Thank you very much for everybody who listened. If you made it this far, I appreciate it, and hopefully I will see you next time.